Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Kerr, and I am a near-death survivor. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And this happened to me in 1983 when I was only 19 years old and a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. On Sunday, August the 28th, 1983, I was at a squadron event and I was getting a ride back with a senior cadet, and unbeknownst to me, he had been drinking a lot and he had an ulterior motive instead of just getting back to the academy, which we had a curfew. He wanted to stop and get a couple of beers, have a cigarette, and then he wanted to make out. And one thing that you have to understand about me is I grew up in the South, in Mississippi. I grew up in the Bible Belt. I grew up in a very conservative household. My dad was a former Marine who actually graduated from the academy, and he was very strict, and he had rules. So in terms of religion, I grew up Southern Baptist and I grew up Lutheran, so we have the Ten Commandments, but my dad also had his Ten Commandments, and we knew that his rules, if you broke them, you were going to get severely punished. So when he told me when I went out to the Air Force Academy, he said, "Here are your rules. I don't want you to smoke, I don't want you to drink, and I don't want you to date cadets." Well, to me, going off to the academy was like, well, there's no fun in that. Everybody I who graduated with was going off to Ole Miss, Mississippi State, all these other schools, and they were going into fraternities and having fun. So after I finished my first year, which was very difficult for me, but starting my sophomore year, I knew I did not want to be at the Air Force Academy. My soul knew that I did not want to be there. I did not belong there. The only reason I was there was because I was trying to please my father. And some of you may have that identity. You're a people pleaser. And I'm actually in recovery from it, because when you're a people pleaser, you're going to live in fear, and you're gonna hustle yourself into trying to do things to please others, and at the end of the day, you're not gonna ever win, and they're never gonna be happy. So that took me a long, long time, and in the South, that's part of the culture down there, is really pleasing others. And so that was why I was at the Air Force Academy, was to please my father. I had not one military bone in my body. Okay, I grew up taking ballet, I modeled, I played softball. I was not a varsity athlete. I was not into airplanes or the military at all. And they had just started admitting women when I entered. I actually was in one of the beginning classes of women. And it was a very, very abusive environment. And when I went into boot camp, I was not prepared for it and wound up having to go to remedial training. I got through it by the grace of God and started my second year still knowing and still fearing that I was going to somehow fail out or flunk out, and I just wanted to quit. And I didn't have permission from my dad or my mother to quit. And I don't know about any of you out there, but I grew up in a family where failure is not an option. If you start something, you have to finish it. So I had that pressure on me, and the thought of quitting, I couldn't deal with the pain, the shame, the feeling of less than, not good enough, the disrespect, the dishonor of quitting. And I realize that now, that that's all part of that people pleasing and looking for the love and admiration, and thinking if I performed well and did what my father wanted me to do, then I would be accepted and loved and a star in his eye, I guess is what I would say. So that evening, as I was getting a ride back with this senior cadet who I really didn't even know, I didn't realize he had this other agenda. So I thought, for the first time in my life, I'm going to have some fun. So I went and I had a beer. I smoked a cigarette for the first time. Now, this is at 19. Most of the people do this around 14, 15, 16, right? And then he wanted to stop and he wanted to make out. And I knew we had a curfew at the academy, and I was really concerned about that, and I told him no. So we got back on the road. We were in a 1965 Corvette convertible. It did not have seatbelts. And I thought, wow, I'm cool here in this convertible and, just having some fun finally in my life. And then he started wanting to make out, and I was just like, nah, I really don't want to go that far with you. I don't even know you. And so he got really angry with me, and when he pulled back on the road, he started speeding, and he tried to put his thigh on my hand, and I slapped it off of him, and he got really mad at me and jerked the wheel, and the back end of the car fishtailed and hit a huge boulder, flipped the car over. We were both ejected out of the car, and I was pronounced dead at the scene. It was a horrific accident. Some bystanders heard the crash when it happened. They immediately called 911 and came out to check on us. The driver had minimal injuries, and they could not get a pulse on me or any kind of vitals, so they went in and got a blanket and covered me up. And the rescue unit, EMT, volunteer department got there first, and it took them about 10 to 13 minutes to get there. So I was clinically dead between 10 to 13 minutes. When the EMT showed up, the first guy on the scene was EMT John Hartling, and he immediately took the blanket off of me, tried to get vitals, couldn't get anything, did what you call a sternal knuckle press, which is really designed to elicit pain in the body. And the only sign of life that he could get out of me, you guys, was the right pupil in my eye dilated. It blenched and dilated. That was it. Okay, nothing else. And he immediately knew that I was still alive, and he was scared to death that he was going to lose me. And I will tell you now, if you've heard of that saying, our eyes are the window to our soul. My soul had flown out when I crashed through the windshield and went up into the air. And I froze in that position, and I knew when I looked down that I was going to die. I just knew it, and I called out to God to please help me. And what happened was an angel came and took me up to the other side. And the reason I know this story, because I was totally unconscious, is because John came to my hospital room 10 weeks later to check on me, told me what he knew, and also I had the medical records, I had the district attorney records. I went and interviewed all of the healthcare professionals 25 years later. So I have it all validated and documented about what happened at the scene and then during the following 2 NDEs after that happened in the hospital. So John did the sternal knuckle press, realized I was alive, got these, they're called masked pants, and they just put them on the bus, and it was the first time for him to use it, and what they do is they push all the blood up to your heart. At that point, I had massive injuries. In fact, he will tell you that there was no blood at the scene. That's what shocked him the most. I was bleeding from the bone, which is a medical condition that is severe from shock. And I had cut off my left foot, I'd broken both sides of my pelvis, I'd severed my right wrist, I had a horrific road burn on the right side of my face from skidding along the pavement, and of course was dead. I was gone. And so when my right eye flinched, my soul, which had been on the other side, came back, and it came back through my eye. That's why I say our eyes are the window to our soul. And at that moment, guess what happened? They got a blood pressure reading on me of 60/0. Now that's still life and death, okay? Because the normal blood pressure readings are between 120, 130/80. Okay, so I was still going in and out of death at that moment. They immediately transferred me to the ambulance, got me to the nearest community hospital, and they did CPR on me the entire 20 minutes it took to get to the hospital. Now, for any of you that know about CPR, that is a long time to do CPR on somebody. So once I got to the hospital, my trauma unit was kind of pieced together because they didn't have an official trauma department at this community hospital. And what they did that night was just try to stabilize me. The accident happened at 7:35 that night, and it took them the entire night in surgery to stabilize me. Then I proceeded to be in the hospital for 4 months, 7 weeks in ICU, and I was on an up and down roller coaster that entire time. I would start to get better, and then I would sink. I would start to get better, and then something else would happen. So 2 weeks after I was in the ICU, they had to do emergency surgery because I had cut a 4th-degree tear, laceration, actually, 4th-degree laceration between my anal and sphincter muscle. And so they had to perform a colostomy because of all the debris, the feces, the gravel, the sand, the grit, the fiberglass was all in me, and it was making me really toxic. And so that surgery, I started coding on the way to the operating room. So they got me in the operating room. They did not put me completely under. I could feel the surgeon cutting into me. I could hear faint voices, but they had my hands strapped down and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't move. And so I left my body. They would put me in a colostomy, which I had no idea what that was as a 19-year-old, but that's where they remove part of your bowel and put a bag over it so that you can go to the bathroom externally. And it allowed for that area between my anal and sphincter to start healing up. But at that point, I left the room and I went into cardiac arrest, and they could not revive me. And they actually called time of death, pronounced me dead on the operating table, went and told my parents, who were praying in the chapel. My parents are very religious, and I would say at this point in life, they're religious addicts. And the surgical nurse told my parents that they had lost me and they were really sorry, and that they needed to start thinking about where the funeral preparations needed to look like. So my mother later told me my dad started to cry, first time she's ever seen him cry, and my mother wouldn't believe it. Then within 2 minutes, the surgical nurse runs back into the room and says, "Mr. and Miss Kerr, Nicole's heart started going again, and she's going to be moved in the recovery room shortly." Now, how do you explain that? Okay, you can't. And I will tell you this much. I kept trying to go back to the other side. Okay, I really did try. And my angel, who I now know is James, kept telling me, "You gotta stay, Nicole. We gotta keep bringing you back because you have an important mission." And we all have a purpose in life, okay? And I don't want to negate anybody else's purpose, but I got a specific message, mission that was directly given to me by Spirit. And this came to me 19 years later. So my wreck happened when I was 19, and then when I'm 38 years old and working at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, okay, because I had gotten on with my life from physically healing, but I had not gotten on with my life from a mental health perspective or a spiritual health perspective. And I was going to work. I stopped at Starbucks like I did every day, got my usual order, and you guys, all of a sudden, I remembered exactly how I was sitting in the Corvette when the accident happened. Now, I could not remember anything except bright white lights for 19 years. That was all I could remember. And Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, talks about the most common symptom for people that have NDEs is this bright white light. And I'm just going to briefly read what I wrote in my book about the white light. From the beginning of my NDE at age 19, while a cadet, I could clearly remember the white light I had encountered when my body flew from the 1965 Corvette convertible. Rays of brilliant white light flooded me from all sides. Streams of light cocooned me, wrapping every part of my being in a chrysalis of soothing waves. Instead of the pain of the impact, I felt rocked and held. This was bliss. But that was all I remembered about the accident for those 19 years. And then, like I said, 19 years later, the repressed memories started revealing itself, the crash itself, and my time on the other side. And on the other side of death, I will tell you, when I left my body, God was all around me. God was in me. God was me, and I was God. God was presence and fullness and oneness, and most of all, God was love, and God is love. Pure, no strings attached, unconditional, open arms love. And in that state, I had not suddenly received forgiveness from a stern Father for my mistakes. My mistakes just didn't exist. They never had. Nothing I had done on earth needed to be weighed or measured. The life I had just left behind told a story, yes, but just one of the many I have lived in different realms. I honestly felt like an astronaut floating in outer space, filled with wonder and awe. So, remembering how I was sitting in the car was really important because that told me how I cut my foot off and how I cut up all the inside of my legs and basically saved my spine and my brain. I did have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, which I now deal with PTSD, actually complex PTSD, which unfortunately I am a 100% disabled veteran now. Through the system, was not diagnosed with that until 3 years ago. I was given so many misdiagnoses, but that's a whole nother story. But on the other side, I talk about how I didn't hit the ground. I could see when I hit the ground I was going to die, but I never did. So I never felt the pain of impact. And that is a common element also with NDE survivors, is they don't feel the pain because their soul leaves them prior to them actually dying. And in case you don't know this, we're all energy, and we all have energy bodies. And upon death, your energy body cracks open from the top down, and your soul leaves you. And as my soul was leaving me, an angel came down. And in the book that I wrote called You Are Deathless, I described it as Casper the Friendly Ghost, kind of translucent. It had male qualities, younger, in its 30s, and I couldn't get any more clarity for 39 years than that. And then as soon as I published my book, wouldn't you know it, I started smelling cigar smoke. And I was like, where is that coming from? Because nobody in my household smokes. I heard a voice and it said, Nicole, this is your grandfather on your paternal side. It's your grandfather, James. And I'm going, uh-oh, what do you want? And he said, I'm here to tell you that I'm your angel. And I was like, what? And he said, Casper the Friendly Ghost is really me. He said, I saw all the pain and the abuse that you were going through at the Air Force Academy. I knew you didn't want to be there. I knew you couldn't quit. And he said, I was there to help you get out. And I was blown away because that is also another element you hear with NDE stories, is that when they cross over, they see deceased loved ones. And I couldn't say that I had because I just saw Casper. But Casper was my grandfather. And so now I know and I can validate that you do see your deceased loved ones on the other side. And he told me that he was going to be with me. He would be my military angel. He would protect me the rest of my life until I transitioned over to the other side. And he's the one that pulled me out of the operation and brought me back. He's the one, the third time when my lungs filled up with fluid and I couldn't breathe and was suffocating. He's the one that pulled me back when I had an out-of-body experience and was on my way to another NDE. I was trying to find the light again that said, no, you got to go back. So what I was told on the other side, first of all, with your eyes, you can only see a certain peripheral degree. When you're in soul form, you can see 360 all the way around you. You see everything all at once. You're not talking English up there. It is through telepathy, through vibration, through music. You understand conversations. And there was a conversation going on next to me between two angels, and they said, you guys, meaning us earthlings, need to ask us for help. To please remember to ask us for help. We are here for you. We want to help you. You're not alone. So please ask for help. And it can be as small as asking for a parking place. And I know people laugh at me when I say that, but you want to know something? Every dead gum time that I ask for a parking place, I get one. So if you don't have a relationship with your angels, and we all have at least one guardian angel, I would say start talking and having a dialogue with the angels, because the spiritual realm wants to help us. Guides, angels, all of them want to help. But we have to ask because we have free will. But the main mission that Spirit gave me on the other side when my memory returned was to not be afraid of death. Now, death is a huge subject, and we are a culture in the United States of death denial. We don't want to talk about it. It's kind of like if we talk about it, it's going to happen. I don't know. It's really interesting. Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to talk about it. But I will tell you that while that seems like a simple message, it's taken me almost 4 decades, my entire adulthood, to understand what that looks like for me. And now I understand what that purpose is, and I have focused my work towards spirituality. I've been in the wellness field in my entire life because of all the injuries that I had. So I know all about physical, eating properly. In fact, I even became a dietitian because I developed an eating disorder as a result of not getting mental health help immediately. I can't say enough about when you have gone through trauma. You have got to work through the trauma to heal. Also, I helped people in terms of emotional. I went into neuroemotional technique to help myself and wound up realizing, oh my goodness, this is one of the reasons people sabotage themselves with food, especially is they'll go and they'll compensate with their Ben and Jerry's or their comfort foods when they hit a stressor and they can't resolve it. And that's all in our unconscious belief systems. And we really start needing in our wellness communities and in the healthcare profession to start dealing with these suppressed, repressed belief systems that no longer serve us, that we're still acting out, that wind up sabotaging what it is we really, really want. I will tell you, in almost every book written, and it took me 13 years to write my book, let me tell you, because it was not easy, but it did help in my healing process. Death itself is cloaked in this veil of doom and gloom, and it has this cloud of depression and negativity throughout our culture and our society. But my own experience and hundreds of thousands of others who have had near-death experiences is 100% different. Death is absolute beauty, light, loving kindness, this peace that passes all understanding. That's what's on the other side. God is love. There is no fear. There is no pain. You are not alone. You know, being raised in the Bible Belt, I feared God just like I feared my father. And then I went to the academy and I feared the upperclassmen. Okay, so my whole life I'd been running on fear, which is exhausting. And the thing about fear is it keeps you from having clarity. And fear's coming from your amygdala, your part of your brain that's in fight, flight, or fear. And that is running your system consistently. You're not going to make the best decisions for yourself. So it's really important to start using your executive reasoning part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is your parasympathetic state. And in order to do that, you may need to get help from others that can help you start identifying and shifting when you get stressed and triggered, because living in that stress state is only going to cause dis-ease in your body, and it's going to sabotage you from being the being that you were created to be in this lifetime. I guess one of the things I would like to say is we're human and we're spiritual, so you have to balance those two. I want people to understand that from the human perspective, when you pass, there is still suffering, there's pain, there's loss, there's grief, and we must carefully and compassionately hold and heal that with others. But I want us to start changing the narrative around death and look at the bigger cultural context, which is benevolence and extraordinary, knowing that that true context enables us to live a happier life, because when we fear death, we're not going to truly live. And we need to start preparing for our own graceful passing and to support others as they approach their own transition. You know, guys, we never know when our last day on earth is going to be. None of us do. And if we actually lived with that awareness, we would be more present, we would be more humble, we would be kinder, we would be more loving, and we would live in a deeper way. And I think that's important, to stay in the present and to be mindful, not to be obsessive about it, but to know that you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And when you meet people, that it may be the last time that you see them. So how do you want to leave that conversation, you know? And it really does help reframe things. And I want to talk right now about the 10 most common lessons from NDEs. And this is really important, because if you can learn these lessons now while you're still here on earth, your transition is going to be a lot smoother and easier, and your life with you is going to be a lot shorter and easier as well. And this comes from the International Association of Near-Death Studies. I was at CDC. I was a scientist, so science is important to me to help back things up. But I also recognize the spiritual nature of the supernatural and the mystical and the mysterious, and know that that exists as well. And so to have this evidence helps support my messages too. And the first one is, we do not die. Hence the title of my book, We Are Deathless. Okay? What does die is the physical body. Yes, it is going to decay and die. But our soul lives on. And in fact, our soul has many lives. This isn't our first rodeo. The second one is, love is all that matters and is the source of all that exists. And in this day and age, I think it's really important for us to love ourselves first, because if we can't love ourselves, we're not going to be able to love others. And when I say love yourself, that means to take the shoulds out of your vocabulary, okay? Should is a very shaming, low vibration word. And if you shame yourself, your children, your family members, it does nothing positive for anybody. But love is the source of all that matters. That's Creator, God, Source, higher power, whatever you want to call it. That is love. God is not fear. Fear is a man-made concept that has been created in order to control people. On the other side, fear does not exist. Okay? In fact, good and bad don't exist. It's only good. Good and bad are earth terms that were created for us in order to help evaluate ourselves and others. So if it's all good on the other side, there's not going to be a bad or judgment. 3, everyone and everything is connected. I said earlier, we're all energy. And we are. And think about this, how we're all connected to Mother Earth. We're all connected to sentient beings, and we're all, as humans, connected to one another. You know, when I was in the military, one of the things they taught us was we all bleed red, okay? It doesn't matter the person's race. It doesn't matter their sexual orientation. Nothing matters when someone is lying there bleeding out or has a horrific injury. You're just there trying to save the person, okay? And so if we could take that concept and start practicing it and realize how we are all connected, and that what you say, think, and do does affect others, and be mindful of that in your daily life, it will help change your vibration and the vibration of the world. For loving ourselves and others is the most important thing we can do. Okay, there's your purpose if you're looking for a purpose. How do you love yourself? How do you quit beating up on yourself, beating up on others, and truly understand that love is unconditional? That is a long journey that all of our souls are here evolving with, because most families, most institutions, organizations, they put conditions around love. including most religious organizations and theologies. 5, we are more than our physical body and brain. Of course we are. When we leave this body, the brain is an organ, it's going to deteriorate as well. That's the mind. So the soul is what lives on. So this is where you need to start thinking about, if you haven't already, is developing a relationship with your soul. And you may go, oh my gosh, I don't even know what my soul is. I know when I was 19, I didn't have any concept of that. And one good exercise that I take from Lee Harris is, if you journal, just write at the top of the piece of paper, what does my soul want me to tell me today? What does it want me to know today? And you may not get anything the first day or the second day, but keep at it, okay? And it'll eventually start the relationship between you and your soul. 5, we are never alone. Now, during COVID, this was really hard for people, especially to watch their loved ones dying in nursing homes and hospitals, and they weren't allowed to be there. But we have to remember there's a whole spiritual cadre, I mean thousands upon thousands of angels and deceased loved ones and ascended masters and guides and all these people on the other side that are always with us. And I will tell you, every single one of us has a angel, okay? We all have a guardian angel. So get to know and start the relationship with your guardian angel. 7, we're not judged. Now that may come as a surprise to a lot of you, but there's no judgment on the other side. That's all, once again, man-made to keep you in fear, keep you in your place, make you feel less than, not good enough. 8, our true selves are perfect, and we are loved more than we can fathom. That's who our soul, our essence really is. 9, we will see loved ones and others when we return when we return home. Okay, you will see your deceased loved ones on the other side, and you will also see your pets, which is great to know, because for a lot of us, our pets are some of the only ways that we have received unconditional love. So they are going to be there greeting you and booking and just so glad to reunite with you. And then the last one is, you will have a life review, okay? And that's not a judgment, it's a life review. We learn how everything that we said, did, and thought during our physical life on this planet impacted ourselves, others, and the world. That is why it is really important that you be present, you be mindful about your choices in what you say to others, and that you be aware of behaviors. That's the first key to changing, is the awareness, and to becoming more loving, kind, and just your true essence that you forgot, the spiritual amnesia we got when we were born, about that we're perfect. You know, there was nothing ever wrong with us. We just got conditioned that way. So those are the 10 common lessons that I really want you to think about and start putting into practice now, so that you don't have to die like I did in order to learn them. And I will tell you, your soul's journey is ongoing. No one ever gets there, okay? And so we're always being presented with new opportunities. And I guess the last thing I would like to say is, today I have left my occupation and I am now in my vocation in light, and I'm an intermality advocate. And that may sound like a new word to you, but it's actually in the dictionary, and William Faulkner even used it. Quality of state of being eternal, having no end, endlessness, everlasting. And I will end with this, saying that always know that you are an eternal spark of God. God is not outside you. God is within you. And your soul is radiant and everlasting. And the 2 themes on the other side are love and oneness. Thank you. We all fall with billows in our eyes, staring lost up at the sky. We all fall with billows in our eyes.